All right, Elaina Mitchell, welcome to Persistence Playbook.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I like the name too.
Thank you. Well, you also have a podcast with the word persistence in it. So
It's such an important thing to have on your journey, persistence.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it is like, to me, I think it's the most important thing to have. And we'll definitely dive into your specific formula for your own persistence as we move along. But, I want to start off with, one of the things that you specialize in is brand, right? You're a brand strategist for huge companies across the nation. And the word brands kind of gets thrown around a lot these days. What does the word brand mean to you?
So, a brand is so many different things encompassed under one umbrella. It really is a community that you're able to build, both visually and through a shared experience. Um, so, there's a lot of strategy involved in that. So, branding is the visual side of a brand identity. A brand in general is more or less a mission in a community that you're creating.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess what can we do as business owners to fundamentally make our brands more memorable?
Definitely having a really detailed mission and having a story that isn't your typical sob story, victim story, something that really hits home for your target audience. A story behind your brand and a mission is really going to make you stand out online.
So let's talk about mission then, right? The first component there, building a memorable brand. How do people who are maybe feeling a little bit unsure of their mission gain some clarity on what that mission is?
It's asking yourself the right questions is really key. So whenever I'm consulting with a new branding client, I ask them three very important questions. Who are you? What do you stand for? And how do you want to help the world? If it's a personal brand that we're building, if it's a product-based brand, the questions are a little bit different. But based on those answers, a lot of times business owners haven't even asked themselves those simple questions. Who am I? What do I stand for? How do I help? And once we develop those answers, we can get a little bit more strategic about how we convey that message to your target audience.
Those are really important questions. And they probably are questions that many people or business owners haven't necessarily deliberated on for long enough. And you just kind of jump into this thing, but you're not really even thinking about, who you are, what you stand for, or specifically, what avatar are you helping? And those are pretty crucial, I think, as far as developing that mission that's going to really resonate with people. You are a big proponent of journaling. You sell these awesome success journals. You can find them on Amazon. I definitely recommend everyone listening go and check them out. Why do you think that this habit is so important?
So I have a really personal relationship with journaling because I always had issues with communication since I was really young. I always thought with pictures. And so it's hard when I'm even conversing sometimes to fluidly speak. So journaling is a really clear connection from the brain through the hand onto the paper that helps me get my thoughts out a little more clearly. But in general, journaling, when practiced daily, is just going to help you answer those questions that sometimes we forget to ask ourselves. And once you can reflect in those ways, you start to understand yourself better, which helps you level up in all areas of life.
So let's say like someone's never really committed to a journal practice. Maybe they did it a little bit in college. They've kind of done it here and there, but never really seen much from it. What prompts would you advise a newbie journaler starting with to get themselves going?
The first three that come to my head, and I think it's because I ask my clients this all the time, would be who are you? What do you stand for? How do you
Yeah.
want to help the world? And going deeper there, but also understanding your childhood, I think is where we unlock a lot of the key components to who we really are. And we forget it along the way because we are infiltrated by outside sources and influence, I guess. So going back to your childhood and being able to write out certain memories helps you understand this is why I am a certain way and how can I now optimize who I truly am to be the best version of self.
Interesting. Really, I like that. And I noticed you mentioned a couple times writing it out freehand. Do you feel that's a much more powerful way than say like hammering away on a keyboard and journaling that way?
Absolutely. I think that there's a lot of science behind the connection between the brain and the stem running through your arm out of your fingers onto that paper. Like I said, it's a clear channel that you're able to release from. And when we're typing, there's also a lot of science behind the energy field that electronics create. So even wearing an Apple Watch, right? Your arm's not going to be as strong with that Apple Watch on. So when we're releasing thoughts and ideas through electronics, I believe that there's science that actually backs up you're not able to truly release the full amount of energy or thoughts because it's flowing through an electronic device. So removing the electronics, handwriting, it's the best.
Yeah, no, I agree too. And I think it also kind of also would slow me down a little bit. When I've journaled, with the computer, I find I just kind of bang it out really quick. But I find that writing freehand slows me down a little bit. It slows my mind down a little bit where I can really kind of tap into those inner thoughts that I'm really trying to get to there. So I agree. I do think freehand journaling, you may not put out as many words as you would while typing, but I think it'll be ultimately more effective if you stick to the freehand method. And I want to kind of stick with journaling because I know it is something that you're really passionate about. And I think it's something that anyone that's really devoted themselves to over a course of time has seen some benefits from. Do you try and square off a certain amount of time every morning, or is it more just kind of you do it when you feel it? Like what does your actual journaling practice look like?
Yeah, right before bed, I try to give myself 30 minutes to an hour to journal. But sometimes we fall out of routines. I think that's human nature. Life happens. So just when you feel the inspiration to release, having that opportunity to pull your journal from your bedside or on your nearest bookshelf is key.
Now, do you ever write in like the form of affirmations? Because I've certainly heard of, very successful people that have done things like that, right? Grant Cardone used to write out his affirmations every day, and then eventually a lot of them became a reality. Do you do anything in that form, an affirmation type thing, or is it more really just kind of like whatever thoughts come to mind?
I think I started the affirmations about a year or two ago because I've started learning more about manifestation and the power of affirmation. I was actually listening to your last podcast episode before we jumped on, and I loved the topic and learned a lot actually. But yeah, so
Thank
I
you. I
have a few
appreciate that.
affirmations. Of course, yeah, it was a great topic. I love your podcast in general. All the topics are amazing. So yeah, I just got into affirmations and I've noticed the power of writing it out. Again, helps you get more clear. It aids in the visual aspect of it as well. And it's cool to be able to look back and say, wow, I actually wanted that and I got it by writing it out. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty important process. And yeah, our entire last episode was all on manifestation. And, it was a pretty interesting conversation for sure. I learned a lot about manifestation myself. I'd never really experimented with anything like a dream board or a vision board. Curious, have you done anything in like the dream board, vision board world?
I think when I was younger, but when what popped into my mind when I was listening to that episode was when we were kids, we would put posters all over the walls and cover it almost like a dream board. Did you used to do that as a kid?
I don't think I
Like
did, but
cover every inch of your wall with posters and stuff?
oh yeah, sure. I had some posters up. I had, they weren't really dream boards though. Actually, maybe in my, in my like 8 and 9 year old mind, they were a dream board. They were usually professional wrestlers, and I probably did want to become a professional wrestler at that point. So I guess in a way it was a dream board.
Yes, yeah. So me and my little sisters would cover every inch of our wall, but with like fashion pictures that we liked or the nice car in the magazine. It was a form of dream board, but I don't think we realized it as children. It was just the way we decorated our room. So I definitely see the power in being able to visualize the life that you want.
For sure, for sure. So I did, a pretty deep dive on your socials before this, and I've been following you for a while. And what I love about your Instagram in particular is you're very authentic. You're very vulnerable, with your audience, which I think is an incredibly useful tool for connecting with your audience. So for people that are, posting on social, they're not seeing a lot of engagement. Their messages aren't really resonating. How can they just tap into that inner self that is just more open to being vulnerable with their audience? How can we be more vulnerable on social media?
That's such a great question. And it took me years to get to that point because I personally, at times, use my social media like a journaling outlet. Like I share some deep things sometimes. And I know that can scare people. So what I would recommend is understanding that what you're going through, sorry, my dog's here drinking water now,
Oh,
but
no worries. Happy to have him on the show.
yeah. So, understanding that what you're going through in life, other people out there are going through something similar. So when you can take your message and then reflect it on other people and make it about them, that's what builds the community. It's not just sharing your message or your vulnerability about me, victim story. It's how does this now relate to others out there? And that's what builds that long-term community.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it is a process, right? When you first start posting on social, it's going to be difficult to really be very genuine or vulnerable, but you just have to kind of slowly expand that muscle as you go and just start being a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more authentic here and there until it becomes a habit. And I really think the reason that your socials resonate so well is because you can tell when reading those captions that you wrote them. You didn't
Yeah.
outsource that, but you could tell that like you're not outsourcing, those to like a VA in the Philippines. Like Elaina Mitchell wrote those captions. That is your 100% self.
100%. And you know how you'll always know there's always a typo or two in there.
Sounds good. When the grammar gets picture perfect, I'll have to start questioning the authenticity of it all.
Yeah, no, I'm known for typos. It's so funny because sometimes I just pour it out really fast and I type up a caption and I hit send without reviewing because I'm so like into it. So yeah, I'm known for that.
I love it. Do you, and I'm curious too, because some of your captions are long. I usually read the whole thing because they really are pretty captivating. Do you type those on your phone or do you type those on your computer? Just curious.
That's a great question. And I just recently started typing them on the notepad of my computer and copying, pasting onto my phone because so many typos. When I would do it directly from my phone, I would just type it too fast without proofreading. So
yeah, because I wonder that for the people who really post these beautiful long captions. I'm like, oh my God, did they write that entire thing on their phone? Like, that's unbelievable. That's a lot of thumbs. It's a lot of thumb work.
it is. It really is. And sometimes when I used to just post it directly like that, I would wish that I had a backup note somewhere to reference in the future. And yeah, so.
For sure. So, while I was kind of looking over your socials a little bit, preparing for the episode, I saw one quote that you posted, and I don't know if it was your quote or if you got it from somewhere, but I found it to be pretty powerful. And I was curious, what your specific thoughts are on it. And it was, God doesn't call the qualified, God qualifies the called. And I was just curious what your thoughts are on that quote.
So that's not my quote directly, but it resonates very deeply with me because I believe we all get glimpses into who we could be. And those are God taps, in my opinion, letting you know your potential. But we get fearful because we can't imagine getting to that level. And so all of these things play in our head of what doesn't qualify us. Ed Milet talks about this a lot, which I love him for. All of the things that disqualify us actually qualify us to actually connect with the people we're meant to help in the world. And if you didn't go through the things you've been through, there's no way you would connect with those souls. And I think we have this misconception because of social media that we're all supposed to connect with millions of people. And that's when you've made it. I think that we're truly meant to connect with the people that cross our paths authentically. And it doesn't have to be a million or a billion people. And we should still feel equally valuable, no matter how many people are resonating with us.
Yeah, I completely agree, right? Some people may be destined to speak in those rooms of, 50,000. Some may be destined to speak in smaller rooms, but you're still having an impact on the people in front of you. And that's what's important. It doesn't make one better than the other. I completely agree with that. And I also agree with the fact that, when we have those big dreams in our mind and in our heart, it is God that put them there. And it is on us to chase those dreams and kind of fight past that voice in our head that also says that we can't do it. And I've also heard you say something which I found interesting, and I agree with, is that if you've got a big dream in your heart, know that not everyone has that, right? There are people out there that are super content just living a very kind of, I don't want to say small, but maybe they don't want to change the world. They just want to have a small impact within their family, within their community, which is fine. Neither's better than the other. But if you've got a big dream in your heart and you really want to make big changes in the world, then that was put inside you for a reason. And it's kind of your obligation to go after it.
Amen. And not make it about you, but make it about the way you're serving the world for those to
Right.
come after you. I think naturally, as human beings, our ego comes into play and we make our mission about ourselves. I'm a believer in God and Jesus Christ, and I gave my life to God. And I said, God, use me as a vessel. So that's when ego gets removed. Now you can't be scared to show up and be vulnerable because you know it's not for you. You're being a vessel for others. And that's where the awakening really happens, in my opinion, both in business and your personal journey.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful mindset shift too. Is just, asking God to use you as a vessel to have that positive impact on the planet. And it kind of takes the ego out of the equation, which I think can be powerful in, just allowing us to take more action, towards our goals. How pivotal has your relationship with God and prayer been to your success?
Oh, it's everything. It really is everything. My Um, so yeah, I actually was skeptical of religion for a long time growing up. And it's because I was an analytical thinker. And I used to think that people were putting on a show, acting like they felt these things when they would pray. It wasn't until I became a mom that God really chased me down and showed me his power and that the visions in my head are given from him. And so that's when I started saying, surrendering. I give my life to you, God, guide me, and I will follow. And so now I'm constantly looking for that guidance. I've removed the ego. I don't want a path that I'm paving. I want a path that's being guided for me because I know that's the ultimate path for who I'm created to be. So, anyways, yeah, I'm constantly looking out for guides from God, and that's what guides me in business and my personal life. And so when things don't go my way, it's kind of okay. Like you just brush it off really easily because you're like, I know that if that was for me, God, you would have given it to me. And if it wasn't, take it away.
I love that. That's really powerful stuff. And I completely agree with it. Some people, I think, have this seed in their heart and they've got this big dream in their soul, but they're maybe not taking as much action towards it as they probably should be. How would you advise someone in that situation to kind of cultivate and grow that seed and start taking action in the face of fear?
Oh, that's such a great question. And I think we all get pulled into slumps of depression or inactivity when it comes to these big dreams or goals because it seems too big to attain.
Right.
So, my recommendation would be take small, bite sized portions of it one day at a time. The term that I remind myself of every day is keep going because sometimes when the vision looks too big, you just have to remind yourself, put one foot in front of the other and just keep going. So, yeah. I also forgot the question because my brain went somewhere else, so I'm sorry if I didn't answer.
No, you really did answer. I mean, really, it's just about like how do we just kind of fight through that voice in our head that says the dream is too big? How do we
Yeah.
get ourselves to take action? I think you kind of nailed it. We all fall into those slumps. We fall into those inactivity sessions, and we just got to put one foot in front of the other. It looks like you just got hit with a lightning bolt of an idea
Yes.
that you want to chime in with. Go ahead.
I was also going to say that's where my mind went is sometimes the depression is important for the reflection. And I think we end up beating ourselves up so badly for the times of inactivity that that makes it even harder to take that next step. If
For
you
sure.
just surrender to the fact that you are exhausted, you need some time to reflect and churn through all these ideas in your head, that's okay. Because there will be a season when you have that energy if you give yourself the season of the reflection, which could be seen as depression sometimes. So,
I agree, right? We don't have to necessarily look on these seasons of inactivity where we're not killing it as a negative. Maybe we needed that. We needed to kind of take a step back, reflect on our journey, and then come forward in the next season with a lot more power. So you got a lot going on, right? You're a social media strategist. You're a brand strategist. You've got a podcast. You've got journals that you make and sell online. I saw you're an aspiring, inspirational speaker. You've got a lot on your plate these days. And I'm just curious, like, what does your personal daily productivity system look like? Are you a time blocker? Are you a to-do lister? Like, what does your daily productivity system look like?
That's such a great question. So last year I actually had to get a life coach to help me get a little more organized
Hmm.
on the personal side, which would reflect into the business side. And one thing that he taught me was to put everything on the calendar, even your to-do list tasks, because if you can visually see it or get that visual reminder throughout the day, it helps you stay on task. For me specifically, my brain definitely jumps very fast from topic to topic. And so
Sure.
having those reminders come up on the calendar again helps me stay the course.
Right.
So there's that.
We just saw one of those jumps like 5 minutes ago, right? It was
Exactly. That is like 24/7 in my world. So I also constantly have written messages on my mirrors to
okay.
keep me focused.
I
Sometimes
like
it's
that.
affirmative messages as well. Um, And then I recently have been working on printed menus and exercise routines for my refrigerator to stay on task with keeping my home organized. Because I truly believe when your home is in order, you can definitely focus more on business on a whole new level for a mom, especially. So,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we've got a toddler, and he is just completely just destroys the house the second that we put it back together. So I've got my home office, which he doesn't really go in, and I try and keep that as organized as possible. But I totally agree. If you are working at like a messy space, then it is going to affect your level of focus. It just is. But if you're working at a very nice, clean, tidy space at a desk that doesn't have stuff everywhere and paperwork all over the place, then you're going to just be able to focus at a much greater level. Like that is just the fact of it. So I completely agree with that. And I kind of want to dive back to brand a little bit. And, how important is it for someone to really choose a specific niche, a niche problem, a niche audience that they're solving for when they're getting started and they're trying to build a brand?
I think in the beginning phases of building a brand, a niche is very important. It really does, though, depend on what type of brand you're trying to build. If you're building a personal brand, I don't believe a niche is very important. If you're building a product-based brand, having one specific product at launch and building out from that is a great strategy because you have less overhead. If you're building a personal brand, having a very broad umbrella helps you branch out in different ways because we are human beings with multiple passions and multiple avenues we want to travel down. So not niching down too heavily as a personal brand, I think is the key.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. And curious, what about like just building a website? I know you build beautiful websites for your companies and customers that you work with. Is simpler better? Less tabs at the top, less copy? Like, what are some of your like baseline rules when you're building a website for a company?
Yeah, so in general, for business, less is more. It helps us focus in on the main information and lead you to the closing point, which would be making the purchase or connecting for a one-on-one, whatever the case might be. So on a website specifically, the strategy is always less copy, an equal amount of imagery, and having destinations that we're leading you through funnels of images, copy, and buttons. So yeah, less is always more. And the simpler the copy is, you have to think as if you're writing for a child. And the simpler the copy is, the easier it is to understand and then take the next step.
For sure. I mean, one thing I noticed that on your website specifically is that it was simple, it was elegant, but like the copy wasn't overwhelming. Even like the bio about yourself wasn't too much. It was enough for me to read in like 20 seconds, right? And you hit all the points, and you've got a very interesting past, by the way. I mean, painter, former model. Now you're the podcast host and brand strategist. I think you even did some woodworking. Is that correct? Did I, did,
Yes.
did I did I stumble upon that in my research that you used to build furniture for people?
And that's what I want to get back into, honestly. Using my hands to create is really where my heart is. So painting on canvas, building with wood, that's a whole nother level of creation, in my opinion. And again, it plays back into the connection from the brain through the hands. I think it's a beautiful thing.
So cool, so cool. And again, just on the topic of brands, and I just think so many small business owners are just interested in how to build a more memorable brand. And one thing that's key to building that brand is building or creating an effective logo. So what are like some of the guidelines that you give clients when picking or choosing or creating a logo? Is it again a less is more type thing with the logo?
That is always what I recommend. And there's a lot of psychology behind why less is more, especially with the logo. So the point of creating a brand identity is to be quickly and easily recognized and remembered. And when you have a logo that's super simple and you can quickly glance and recognize and know what company that logo is from, the easier it is to burn the memory visually into your brain. If the logo has a bunch of details in it, visually your brain can't paint that picture quick enough for you to remember it the next day when you see it again passing on the street in 5 seconds. You know what I mean? So that's why less is more with the logo design. And also it scales better. You can, especially because we're all on our tablets or phones more, having a small, tiny logo with a bunch of details is very hard to distinguish what that even is. So when I'm designing a logo, I take away as many lines as possible so that it's better to scale and easy to quickly read, recognize, and remember.
Love that. And it's so true. When you think of the most iconic logos in history, the Nike swoosh or the Apple, you know, they are simple, right? There's not a lot of words and lines. I mean, it's an apple and it's a swoosh. I mean, it's as simple as can be, but absolutely easily scalable and recognizable. How about brand colors? I want to touch on brand colors. Do you think it's important to have like a set 2 brand colors and then keep those uniform across all your platforms?
Yeah, I think any new brand identity sticking to the same brand colors again helps burn the memory of that brand full identity into your consumer's mind. But I'm not opposed to moving away from those brand colors as time goes on. A brand should develop. As we as humans develop our personality over time, brands should as well. And sometimes that includes changing your color palette slightly. But colors make us feel a certain way, and it depends on the different cultures that you're from or the different demographics. And so understanding the psychology of the colors on that end helps us develop the right strategy for our clients when choosing that color palette.
Very cool. Very cool. So here's a question that we ask frequently on the show. It is Persistence Playbook. We like to talk about the art of persistence and perseverance. And you said you calendar out your day usually, right? You've got your whole day calendared out, but do you ever just kind of wake up and you feel lazy? You feel a little resistance to the work that's on that calendar. You don't feel like doing it. And if so, how do you push through that resistance and do the work, the important work that you know you should be doing?
So I heard this actually on another podcast as well. I don't want to take credit for it, but I forget the person that said it. And he said, just do one step. So if you have a routine and you're feeling lazy, what's the first step you would take if you weren't being lazy today? For me, it's getting on the Bible app, doing my daily scripture and doing a prayer. And then if after you take that first step, you're feeling motivated to take step 2, go for it. And if not, you won't. But usually when you can begin the phase of your routine with that one step, your mind automatically wants to continue on that path towards the other steps of your routine. That's why I believe establishing a routine is key. It doesn't mean you always have to stick to it rigidly, but it gives you the playbook, like your podcast, to take the right steps.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, right? Just get a little momentum going. I think we all wake up sometimes and just the last thing we want to do is, you know, the 7 things on our to-do list. It just happens sometimes. Even if it's work you're really passionate about, you're not going to want to do the work all the time, but just get a little momentum going in that direction, whether it's the first step or maybe it's just, I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. I'm going to start working on this project. And if that 5 minutes goes by and I still don't want to work on it, then I'll allow myself a break. Maybe I need it today, but just get some momentum going because inertia is so powerful. And if we can just get ourselves in motion, we're so much more likely to stay in motion. But sometimes it's about taking that first step and you just feel like you're stuck in the mud at 6 a.m.
Yeah, and one thing also to this whole puzzle is understanding yourself because what works for one doesn't work for all of us. So another thing that works well for me is setting timers, like you just mentioned it, triggered that memory for me. If I'll put on a timer for an hour to get a task done, I'm more likely to push to get it done before that timer goes off. So just testing things out for yourself specifically is how you're going to figure out what motivates you, what helps you get things done, because we're all very different creatures.
Yeah, 100%. You've got to try things, right? Some people are going to work better at time blocking. Some people are going to work better off of a to-do list. Some people will work great with a timer or like the Pomodoro method where you set it for 25 minutes or more, something along those lines. Some people work great in the morning. Some people work great in the afternoon. You got to figure out what your process is that works for you. Curious, this is a question I've been asking some people recently. I'm always interested when I talk to really like high performing, high achievers. How do you leverage caffeine in your workflow? Are you a caffeine consumer?
I'm trying to cut it out because it has consumed my life since I was a teenager. I used to work at Dunkin' Donuts all through high school. And so smelling coffee triggers emotions inside of me, and I love it so much. So caffeine has fueled my life for many years, but I'm cutting it out because I want to find more natural. I guess caffeine is natural to a degree, but I want to find better alternatives to keeping focus. So I've been using lion's mane mushroom a lot in my smoothies, which is great
Nice.
to stay motivated and give me a little boost of energy. So finding alternatives like that.
Very cool. It's a question I'm personally interested in right now because I've kind of been on a similar journey with caffeine. I felt like I was just going on the energy roller coaster every day where I'd be feeling great for 2 hours, then I'd crash. I'd need another cup. I'd feel great. I'd crash. I wouldn't sleep well because of it because I'm having 3 cups a day. So I've actually been off caffeine now for a full month. And I will say it's been a very challenging month. It has been. I think like I'm just starting to kind of feel normal again, but it honestly did take like a full month of complete abstinence, which was really frustrating and even now, I gotta say it takes me a little bit longer in the morning to get going as opposed to what I would prefer. But I'm going to give it 2 months. That was the goal going into it. I'm committed to it. And I've been keeping my social following updated on my progress. But I will say it's been a harder journey than I even anticipated it being. It really has been.
Absolutely, because we're creatures of habit in so many ways, both in our mindset and in our DNA. Our body's craving that coffee, and our mind is craving the habitual process of getting the coffee. For me specifically, it's just getting in my car and driving to Starbucks that I enjoy. And
Right.
sometimes I'll even have the coffee all day and barely sip it. It was just the process of getting it that kind of triggers a dopamine hit for me. So,
Sure. Yeah, the anticipation. Yeah, dopamine's in the anticipation. It really is. More dopamine is released before the event as opposed to during the event. So that
yeah,
definitely makes a lot of sense. Anyways, sorry to segue into caffeine there. That's just a topic that I think is kind of interesting, and I think every like high performer's got their own relationship with caffeine, which I find to be fascinating.
for sure.
So, how can we, better to kind of switch back to brand a little bit here? How can we better emotionally connect our brand to our target audience?
So there's a few different ways we do that. There's visual ways, and then there's ways through copy and communication. Visually, we can connect emotionally with the right colors and imagery styling. It gives off an emotion. When you look at, let's think of Nike, for instance. They're very good with the visual representation of a very moody, determined story, right? And then they pair that beautiful, moody imagery with the copy or the voice of a story paired with it. So when you have the pairing of the images, the colors, and the copy, you connect on a very deep emotional level with your audience.
I love that. I love that. And as far as I feel like you do that a lot as well within your personal social posts. I think like you layer the stories on top of the imaging beautifully, and it really kind of hits you right in the heart. Curious, as someone who's built a large social following, what does your social media process look like? Like, where do you get ideas for content? How often do you create content? Is there a system, or do you just kind of create it when you're feeling like it?
So my personal page is a mess, and it's because I'm doing it all day, every day for clients that I have rarely focused on building a strategy for myself. However, when I'm creating the content, it really is when I feel called, and I haven't put a strategy to grow yet on social because I'm not there mentally with the game plan of which direction I want to grow, if that makes
Sure.
sense. So my personal Instagram has no strategy or rhyme or reason. It's just when I'm feeling motivated or called to post something, I share it. And when I'm not, I stay away. As you notice, sometimes I won't post for like a week and then I jump back in. Um, so yeah, I'm working on that. I'm always like in my head about which way I want to go with social media because I'm not a
Sure.
huge fan of social media, believe it or not. I just like the connection on a personal level with people, but the platforms I'm not a huge fan of. I'm actually developing a social media platform that I think is going to change the world. And I think that platforms like Instagram and TikTok are very addictive for the wrong reasons.
For sure, 100%. I think almost everyone could do better to spend a little bit less time on Instagram and TikTok. Just the doom scrolling, it's not good. It's not good for the soul. It really isn't. And everyone's just putting their absolute best face out there. You can't help but compare yourself to everyone. And after about 45 minutes of doom scrolling, you never feel better.
Yeah.
You certainly never feel better after that. You almost always feel a little bit. It's almost like you just had McDonald's. You know what I mean? It's like, seemed like a good idea at the moment. And then you just finished that last bite of the Big Mac and you're like, that wasn't worth it. I should have done something else with my time. I
Yeah.
completely agree, though. I use an app called Opal, actually, that kind of blocks social media at certain times of the day. So I don't allow myself to access TikTok or Instagram until I think it's currently set 8 to 12 is kind of like my like deep work. Like, don't look at social hours. Sometimes I'll expand it and minimize it. I've also found switching my iPhone to black and white has actually helped a lot with that. Yeah, so
Wow.
you can switch it to grayscale in the settings, which makes everything black and white, and it just makes doom scrolling way less interesting, honestly, when it's not in color.
Wow. I love that. And I never knew that there was an option for that. And it just goes to show you how important color really is to keeping you engaged in something.
There you go. There
Yeah.
it is. Circle it right back to brand. I love that 100%. Yeah, I don't think anyone's really should be choosing black and white as their brand colors. Or maybe I guess they should. It works for some people.
Yeah, it just depends on the market for sure.
Right. Yeah, it depends on if you're like a luxury brand, it might work for that as opposed to something else. But Elaina Mitchell, thank you so much for being with us today. This was an awesome conversation. I learned a lot about brand as well as a lot of other things. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I learned about you as well, and I'm honored to be here.
Where can everyone kind of keep up with what you got going on right now?
You can follow me on Instagram at elaina.mitchell, and then my website, elainamitchell.com, or my branding website is emitchellstudio.com.
There it is, guys. Check it out. Definitely shoot her a follow on Instagram as well. Even though she doesn't have a social strategy, her social platforms are really good, and she's super authentic and vulnerable and genuine. And whenever I read one of her posts, I get something from it. So go give Elaina a follow. This has been Persistence Playbook, guys. And remember, you will face resistance this week and laziness as you go after your big goals. But that's when it's time to lean into your why and take action in spite of it. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.